What's up, everybody? This is Michael. Graveyard shift, wee hours, middle of the night, trivia question, all that good stuff. Happy hump day. I hope your week is going well. Mine's going fantabulous. Finished my final exams for the first 8 weeks. Get a little break, which amounts to maybe a couple of days. Started all over again for Monday, and then I go all the way to Christmas, and I'll be stressed out all over again. So how about that? Awesome. Par for the course. Anywho, the answer to the previous trivia question was, of course, if you didn't figure it out, outer space. Space. The final frontier. Okay, I don't want to get carried away with my Trekkie geek self, all right? But the answer was outer space. So the 1967 Outer Space Treaty, which was what it was called, bans the station, and there is such a thing, this is really cool to research, bans the stationing of weapons of mass destruction in outer space, prohibits military activities on celestial bodies, and it details legally binding rules governing the peaceful exploration and use of space. Okay, that's what's on the books. Now, talks of preserving outer space for peaceful purposes was nothing new prior to this. It began in the late 50s. Again, you've heard me talk about this. We're coming out of World War II. Cold War is ramping up, getting into full gear, and we're into the space race. Okay, we've also got the United Nations factoring into stuff. So the United States and its Western allies submitted proposals in 1957 when they realized that space exploration was actually going to be a real thing. They submitted proposals on reserving space exclusively for peaceful and scientific purposes. Now, who do you think was the ones who balked at this? The Soviet Union. You got it. They rejected these efforts because they were preparing to launch the world's first satellite, which they did in 1957, called Sputnik, if you remember from your high school history class. What they were really going to do was test the first ballistic missile, right? But they weren't going to tell anybody that. They were just going to launch the first satellite and experiment with orbital stuff. Okay, so the Soviet Union would eventually come around and draft to the UN to be a part of the outer space treaties. In June of 66, right, a mutually agreed treaty text was worked out over the next 6 months thereafter, and the treaty opened for signature in Washington, Moscow, and London on January 27th of 1967, and it entered into force officially on October 10th, 1967, which, say it with me, was the focus of the trivia question. Now, the main treaty provisions underscore that space is no single country's domain and that all countries have a right to explore it. Right? Other rules of space, if you will, include the following: prohibiting nuclear weapons in space, limiting the use of the moon and all other celestial bodies to peaceful purposes, because the moon was a big deal back in the when the America got into the space race, right? Establishing that space shall be freely explored and used by all nations, and precluding any country from claiming sovereignty over outer space or any celestial body. The treaty does not expressly ban all military activities in space, however, nor the establishment of military space forces or the placement of conventional weapons in space. That last sentence basically amounts to, over the years people have said, well, maybe we could have military, installation military things up there. Maybe there's some loopholes, okay? So it's flexible, in other words, right? So within roughly a decade of the treaty's entry into force, several other treaties were brokered by the UN, kind of an amendment of sorts, to further develop the legal framework for activities in space. And this included all the latter part of the 60s, okay, all through the 70s, to include space liability, registration convention, moon treaties, legalizing space mining, I think came in the 80s. So there have been different provisions and amendments that have been tacked on to the original 1967 Outer Space Treaty, for sure. Now, although considered a cornerstone of space law, the Outer Space Treaty, like all international law, is technically binding to those countries who signed up for it. But the obvious lack of space police means that it cannot be practically enforced. Okay, so there's no way to enforce this thing. basically what it amounts to. And everybody knows it. Everybody in the world knows it. So a country, individual, or community or company, rather, could simply ignore it if they wish to do so. But don't tell the Russians that, right? It's not like they haven't figured that out. Okay, so my question with this whole thing, after finding out about this initially, really, I didn't even know an outer space treaty existed from the 60s of all things, is this even enforceable? How do you do that? How do you enforce that? Is it kind of like wink, wink, nudge, nudge type of a thing? Oh yeah, don't mind us. We're just prowling around in outer space, building, space projects out there. Don't mind us. We're totally in compliance with the Outer Space Treaty of 1967. Yeah, right. So will it come down to like something that is debatable, like regulating the internet? I'm wondering. Just think about that, right? Is there any way to regulate it, or is it just a free kind of a entity out there where people can do what they want to? And what will that lead to on an international basis eventually? These are things to think about while we're all up there exploring outer space. And now it's all privatized in the United States, by the by. So that adds another factor kind of into the mix. And how that privatization affects the Outer Space Treaty. I don't think that's even been breached and talked about as far as where we are now in space exploration. So it's interesting stuff, folks, for sure. Check it out. All right, folks, let's get on with the rest of the week, shall we? Let's do it right here, right now. Get over that hump day for October 12th. Here we go. Brand new trivia question. On this day, in 1773, a so-called public hospital located in Williamsburg, Virginia, opens in the United States that became known as the very first of these, which was hardly a place of refuge and a term that we no longer use. It's an easy trivia question. Folks, go for the obvious. Good luck. You guys have a wonderful Wednesday. Happy hump day. I'll see you guys tomorrow. I'm here all week. Peace out.